You walk away from that dinner table, the echoes of their demands still burning in your ears. But the truth is, this story didn't begin with one dinner. It began long ago, in the quiet streets of Salt Lake City, where your childhood home looked picture perfect from the outside, yet carried storms within its walls. Neighbors saw a family with a tidy house, decent cars, and smiles on the porch. What they didn't see was the chaos that brewed every time bills arrived, every time your father's business ventures crumbled, and every time your sister lived like tomorrow's problems would never come. Your father was a contractor, always chasing after the next big deal. Some months, money poured in, and the house felt alive with new furniture or gadgets. But just as quickly, another failed project would wipe everything away, leaving you scrambling to keep the lights on. At 15, while most of your classmates were busy with after-school clubs, you were bagging groceries, each paycheck tucked into the family's survival fund. Not because you wanted to, but because you had no choice. And then, there was your sister. Raven, 2 years older, seemed to live under a different set of rules. She bought designer bags as if money grew on trees, posting photos of herself at parties, cocktails in hand, clothes sparkling under neon lights. She laughed once, telling friends that your paychecks were basically her shopping allowance. Your mother just smiled, saying Raven was a free spirit, as if recklessness was something to be praised. And you stood at the sink, scrubbing dishes, while their phone bills and shopping sprees drained the very wages you fought to earn. Do you remember those late nights spent over borrowed library books, studying chemistry while the rest of the house slept? You thought hard work would be your ticket out, that if you just kept going, your family would finally see your worth. Yet, each time you brought home a report card filled with A's, your father barely looked up. "That's nice," close quote, he would mutter, "but how much did you make this week?" Close quote. In his eyes, you weren't a child with dreams, you were the reliable one, the provider in training. At 16, you added a weekend diner job on top of everything else. The smell of grease clung to your clothes, but you told yourself it was worth it. Every dollar went toward a secret goal. Saving for college. Still, the moment you saved a few thousand, it was gone, swept away by yet another of your father's failed business plans or your sister's latest whim. Once, you watched Raven parade a brand new Louis Vuitton purse while you sat counting the crumpled bills you had handed over to keep the family afloat. "Don't be selfish," close quote, your mother told you when you dared to protest. "Family comes first." But deep down, you knew they weren't talking about family, they were talking about you. That realization hardened something inside you. You started filling out scholarship applications until your eyes blurred. While your sister escaped to Miami and Las Vegas, you stayed behind, trading parties for textbooks, fast food for ramen noodles, and luxury for relentless sacrifice. And when the acceptance letter came, the full ride to a pre-med program, you felt both triumph and dread. Triumph because you had clawed your way to a future they couldn't steal. Dread because you knew even this victory would come with their demands. Moving out was no real escape. The phone calls still came, always the same. "Raven needs help. We're behind on bills. Can you send money?" Close quote. And time after time, guilt pressed you into saying yes, even when you had to skip meals to do it. It wasn't love they were asking for, it was sacrifice. A sacrifice that never seemed to end. By the time you entered med school, the pattern was etched in stone. Your days blurred into lectures, anatomy labs, and overnight shifts cleaning hospital floors just to keep yourself afloat. Your body ached, your mind swelled with formulas and surgical techniques, but each time you tried to focus on your future, another message from home pulled you back into their orbit. Still, you pressed on. Every test passed, every professor's nod, every late night spent memorizing the intricacies of the human brain, fueled your determination. You weren't just studying medicine, you were studying freedom. And yet, the shadows of your family never left. Your father's voice echoed whenever you dared to dream too boldly. "You'll make good money soon." Your mother's guilt seeped through the phone line. "Raven is struggling again." And your sister's smirk lingered in memory, a reminder that no matter how hard you worked, they believed your success belonged to them. That imbalance wasn't just unfair, it was suffocating. Have you ever felt that way? As if every step forward you fought for was quietly claimed by someone else? If so, you know the quiet ache that settles deep inside, the one that whispers, "Maybe they'll never see me for who I am." But here's what you also know. You kept going anyway. Because somewhere inside, you believed there had to be more than being the family's safety net, more than living as a shadow of someone else's choices. You believed that one day, you would stand tall enough to be free. And that belief carried you further than you thought possible. Through endless nights of exhaustion, through moments when failure seemed closer than success, through sacrifices no one ever acknowledged. You didn't just survive those years, you built the foundation of the life you were destined to claim. Your story up to this point isn't simply about hardship. It's about the fire forged inside you, the fire that made you relentless. The very fire that will soon turn this quiet suffering into a storm no one in your family saw coming. Because one day, after years of silence and sacrifice, you finally understood. They didn't just undervalue you, they underestimated you. And that, more than anything else, was their biggest mistake. If you've ever felt overlooked, if you've ever carried burdens that weren't yours, take a quiet moment now. Gently tap like or subscribe, not because someone demands it, but because you choose to walk this journey with us. Your choice, your power, your story. You thought sharing your greatest achievement would finally bring pride to your family. After years of sacrifice, sleepless nights, and relentless determination, you believed this dinner would be a celebration of your success. But instead of warm congratulations, the people you trusted most demanded what was never theirs to claim. In a single moment, joy turned into disbelief, and the air around you grew heavy with betrayal. That was when you realized your story was not about celebration, but about reclaiming your worth. Have you ever felt your efforts were overlooked? If family stories like this resonate with you, gently like and subscribe so you won't miss the next twist. You thought that once you entered medical school, life would finally follow a new path, a path full of challenges, yes, but one that belonged to you. Yet even inside the lecture halls, your family's shadow clung to you. Calls from your mother, short texts from your father, endless requests from Raven, all of them wove into an invisible rope pulling you back. While you fought to keep your scholarship through sleepless nights and endless study sessions, they treated your success as if it already belonged to them. Once, just before a biochemistry exam, your laptop crashed. Every note you had spent months collecting vanished. Desperate, you called your father, hoping for a little help. His reply was curt. Money's tight. Days later, you saw Raven flaunting a new designer dress on social media, glittering under party lights. Your heart twisted with anger and sorrow. You realized, once again, that in their eyes your dreams and struggles would never outweigh her luxuries. But you didn't collapse. You picked up weekend cleaning jobs, scrubbing floors, wiping down windows until you scraped together enough for a second-hand laptop. Night after night, you juggled shifts and study, your eyes red and your body aching. And yet, amid that exhaustion, a spark appeared. Dr. Barbara, a neurosurgeon at the hospital, noticed the fire in your eyes, not just intelligence but persistence. She became a mentor, guiding you through applications and reminding you that your effort was worth more than their indifference. Still, the pressure from home never let up. Over and over, your mother's voice carried the same plea. Raven's in trouble again. Can you help? Close quote. Every time you sent a few $100s, you cut into your own meals, your own comfort. Love turned into a burden, a cycle of guilt that left you torn between your future and their demands. You lived between two worlds, one shaped by ambition, the other chained by obligation. And then came the moment you had dreamed of. The day you became a neurosurgeon. After years of sacrifice and endless nights in hospitals, you signed a contract with a salary many could only imagine. Nervous but hopeful, you prepared a dinner, inviting your parents and Raven. You pictured their proud smiles, warm embraces, maybe even tears of joy. But reality had a far colder script. When you announced, "I've been hired at a top hospital, $550,000 a year," close quote, the table fell silent. For a second, you believed it was awe. Then your father leaned forward, his voice unsettlingly calm. "Good. Then you'll give us 50% of your salary so we can retire comfortably." Your heart dropped. Before you could reply, Raven added, sharp and entitled, "And I'll need 30% for my lifestyle. You know I can't live without it." In that moment, 80% of your hard-earned life was claimed as if it was theirs by right. They didn't ask how you would live, how you would manage. To them, you were nothing more than an endless source of income. You sat frozen, fork in hand, trembling, until you finally whispered, "I have my own life to support." But your father cut you off, his eyes narrowing. "We raised you. You owe us." Raven smirked, arms crossed. "You're a doctor now. Don't be selfish." The room grew suffocating, each word slicing deeper than the last. You pushed back your chair, the scrape loud against the floor. "I don't owe you my life," close quote, you said, voice shaking but steady. Your mother reached out, pleading through tears. "Don't make this harder for us." Raven stayed seated, smug, as if she had already spent your money. That was the moment you turned and walked away. The slam of the door behind you wasn't just the end of a dinner, it was the start of a storm. That night, your phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Calls, texts, voicemails, anger, guilt, bargaining all piled up. You didn't answer. Instead, you typed one line into the family group chat. "The other 20% is busy." And with that, you turned off your phone. In a hotel room bed, you lay awake, mind racing, heart heavy. You knew this wasn't just about saying no once, it was about reclaiming the right to live for yourself. Have you ever been in that position? When the joy you bled for turned into nothing more than an obligation in the eyes of those closest to you? When the very people you expected to support you became the first to demand what was never theirs? If you have, then you understand the hurt isn't only in the words spoken, but in the chilling silence that follows. Your story was no longer about sacrifice. It was becoming something else. You were no longer the quiet child who carried burdens without question. You were starting to transform that pain into resistance, learning to walk with your own steps. And from that night on, your revenge story had begun, not fueled by rage, but by the resolve to finally live for yourself. If you've ever felt your effort overlooked, if you've ever carried responsibilities that weren't yours, take a moment now. Tap like or subscribe gently, not because anyone tells you to, but because you choose to. Because here, each story isn't just something to hear. It's something to live through, to feel, and maybe, to recognize as your own. That night, when you turned off your phone in the silence of a hotel room, a strange mix of fear and freedom settled over you. The screen was still full of missed calls, unread texts, and voicemails, but for the first time in your life, you didn't feel compelled to respond. You had grown too used to carrying the weight, too used to sacrificing, too used to giving. But when you typed those words, "the other 20% is busy," and sent them off, a line was drawn in the sand. The next morning, you didn't go back home. Instead, you walked into a real estate office. Within hours, you signed a lease for a small apartment across town. It had only one bedroom, bare walls, and no fancy furniture, but to you it was a symbol of freedom. Every box you unpacked, every book you set on a shelf, every shirt you hung in the closet carried a quiet declaration. This life now belonged to you. Your next stop was the bank. For years, every paycheck, every bit of savings had been siphoned into your family's endless bills and debts. Not this time. You opened a new account in your own name, untouchable by anyone else. When you transferred the money, your pulse raced. It felt like cutting. The following days were a blur of final breaks. You called the utility companies, cancelling payments you had quietly covered for so long. Electricity, water, internet, all of them had run in your name, your sacrifice. And with each call, you repeated a sentence that felt heavier, stronger every time. "It's no longer my responsibility." Then came the hardest task, facing Raven's debts. She had used your name for her credit cards, assuming you would always pay. This time, you sat down across from the bank officer, explained everything, and signed papers removing your liability. Your hands trembled slightly, but your voice was steady. "I'm not covering for her anymore." It was another lock broken, another chain undone. Finally, you changed your phone number. Your old line was flooded with calls, a chorus of anger, guilt, and manipulation. Saving only what mattered, you contacted your provider and cut the cord. When the old number disconnected, a deep silence filled the air. At first it was unsettling, but then you realized it was the sound of liberation. You weren't hiding. You were protecting yourself. But of course, your family didn't accept it quietly. Raven took to social media, writing long posts about how ungrateful you were, how you had abandoned your family despite your wealth. Friends and even strangers chimed in, shaming you for walking away. At the hospital, you felt eyes linger on you, whispers behind your back. Even a patient's relative asked, "Are you that doctor in the drama online?" Close quote. Each time, your stomach knotted, the weight of public judgment pressing in. Still, you didn't fight them with words. You chose silence. But silence didn't mean surrender. You found a law office and met with Ruth, a lawyer known for her calm but sharp approach. You laid everything bare. Years of being drained, the dinner that ended it all, the attacks now flooding online. Ruth listened, then said firmly, "You need boundaries. This isn't only about money. It's about your right to peace." Together, you drafted a formal notice to your parents and Raven. Any further harassment, defamation, or excessive contact would face legal consequences. The documents went out by email and certified letter. As you signed, you knew your old home would erupt in anger. And it did. Your father left a furious voicemail on your work line. "You're threatening your own parents now." Close quote. Your mother wrote an email, soft but manipulative. "We just want our daughter back." Raven escalated online, posting cryptic but obvious jabs meant to stir sympathy. The pressure mounted, but this time, you didn't waver. You blocked numbers, filtered emails, reported her posts. At night, you sometimes lay awake, wondering if you had gone too far. But then you remembered your father's cold demands, your mother's guilt-ridden pleas, Raven's smug grin as she claimed your success as her own. For years, you had been the wallet, the safety net, the shadow holding them up. Now you finally understood cutting ties wasn't cruelty. It was survival. Weeks passed, and though the noise persisted, you began to notice something changing inside yourself. You poured your focus into your work, each surgery, each patient, each tense moment in the operating room. Colleagues noticed the shift. Your steps lighter, your eyes clearer, your laughter less restrained. Without the constant weight of their demands, you could finally breathe. Slowly, you began to save not for them, but for yourself. You booked a short weekend trip, bought a small gift you had once denied yourself. The freedom felt strange, almost foreign, as if you were relearning how to live. But with every new step, you understood. You were no longer existing for others. You were, at last, living for you. These choices, walking out of that dinner, moving into your own space, closing off the accounts, cutting the ties, were not acts of loud revenge. They were quiet, deliberate victories. They were the kind of revenge that doesn't scream, but whispers with every breath you take in freedom. They weren't about punishing your family. They were about reclaiming what they had taken for so long. Your right to choose, your right to rest, your right to peace. And in those quiet victories, you began to feel whole again. Time slowly passed after you sent out the legal notice, and the chaos from your family no longer pounded on your door the way it once did. The angry calls, the manipulative texts, the cryptic posts on social media began to fade. Yet, the silence did not immediately bring peace. Instead, during many long nights, you lay awake asking yourself, was I too harsh? Did I abandon my own family? Close quote. Those questions lingered like shadows, heavy on your chest. But then, whenever memories of that fateful dinner returned, the moment your father calmly demanded half your salary, the moment Raven claimed another 30%, as if it were her birthright, they reminded you why you had chosen that path. You hadn't broken your family. They had done that themselves, long before, when they reduced you to a resource instead of recognizing you as a person. Gradually, news from an old acquaintance in Salt Lake City reached you. The house you had once sacrificed so much to save was gone, seized by the bank. Your parents had moved into a cramped apartment downtown. Raven, for the first time in her life, was forced to take a full-time retail job. Hearing this stirred a complicated mix of feelings: sadness, relief, and a strange sense of closure. They were finally facing the reality you had carried for years. The guilt still tugged at you, but through long conversations with Ruth, the lawyer who had stood by you, you learned to see things differently. You didn't cause their downfall, close quote, she told you, her gaze steady. They built this life long before you stopped helping. Your decision only revealed the truth. Her words sank deep, reminding you that protecting yourself was not betrayal. It was simply returning responsibility to those it belonged to. Meanwhile, your work at the hospital became your strongest anchor. You poured yourself into surgeries, into every tense heartbeat you steadied, into every life you saved. The pressure of the operating room was immense, but unlike before, you no longer bore the invisible weight of your family's demands. Colleagues who had once watched you walk with slumped shoulders now noticed something different. Your posture straighter, your eyes brighter, your presence lighter. You weren't just saving patients anymore, you were also saving yourself. Amid this new rhythm, another door opened. You grew close to David, a fellow surgeon who often stood beside you in the most grueling operations. Coffee after late-night shifts turned into deeper conversations where you allowed yourself to speak of wounds you had never shared before. David never judged, never pressed, simply listened and said softly, "You're stronger than you think." Those words, simple but genuine, planted a seed of belief you weren't alone. Another unexpected voice of support came from your Aunt Susan, your mother's sister. After years of silence, she called and confessed she had long witnessed the way your family treated you unfairly, but had lacked the courage to intervene. "You did what I never could," close quote, she said, pride warm in her tone. You broke free. Her words were like a lifeline, proving that real family could exist even if it wasn't the family you had once hoped for. In that single phone call, you realized that sometimes love doesn't come from where you expect, it comes quietly, from the sidelines, waiting for the moment when it's safe to step forward. With this foundation, you began to do things you had never dared to before. You met with a financial advisor, built an investment plan, and started a retirement fund of your own, the very thing your parents had once demanded you provide for them. Each figure in that portfolio was proof that you were walking on your own path. For the first time, money wasn't about survival or fear, it became about freedom. Every deposit, every careful decision whispered the same message. This is for you. This is yours. You also enrolled in a leadership course for surgeons, preparing yourself for the day you would guide an entire team in the operating room. That course wasn't just about skills. It was about reclaiming confidence, proving to yourself that the timid, uncertain person who once trembled in a hotel room could grow into someone others would trust with their lives. You learned how to steady your voice when giving orders, how to keep calm when every second mattered, and how to balance authority with compassion. Step by step, you were becoming the surgeon you had always dreamed of being, no longer defined by family obligations, but by your own determination. 2 years later, you stood inside your very own condo, keys in hand. Sunlight poured through wide windows, illuminating furniture you had chosen yourself, walls painted with colors of your preference, a space entirely yours. You ran your hand across the smooth kitchen counter, the oak shelves lined with books you had picked, the quiet hum of peace surrounding you. No voices criticizing, no footsteps following, no weight pressing on your chest. Just silence, the good kind. You thought back to the night in the hotel room when your hands shook as you walked away from your family. That scared, exhausted version of you had carried the seed of this moment. The road had been long, but you had reached this place through your own strength. As for your family, whispers from relatives told you they were still struggling in that small apartment. They had sent letters, tried to reach out through others, hoping to pull you back. You could almost hear the echo of their familiar words, full of guilt and manipulation, tugging at the old wounds. But you knew opening that door would only mean stepping into the same endless cycle. So you stood firm, handing every attempt over to Ruth to handle. The last time, your mother wrote, asking for reconciliation. You read it once, then tore it apart, not out of hatred, but out of clarity. Forgiveness didn't always mean returning. Sometimes, forgiveness meant letting go, choosing not to carry anger, but also not allowing yourself to be chained again. A sense of peace began to settle over you. The sleepless nights of questioning, am I being cruel? Close quote, slowly dissolved. Now you understood. Setting boundaries wasn't selfishness. It was survival. You had sacrificed enough. It was finally time to live for yourself. You found joy in the smallest things, watering plants by your window, sipping coffee without rushing, reading novels late into the night. Freedom wasn't always dramatic. Sometimes it was gentle, quiet, but no less powerful. In the operating room, you led your team through a complicated procedure, saving a patient in a life or death moment. As colleagues looked at you with respect, you felt the truth settle. You had transformed years of pain into power. You weren't just surviving anymore, you were thriving. And with each surgery, with each life saved, you rewrote your story. You were no longer the child waiting for approval, nor the adult carrying everyone else's burden. You were your own person, standing tall in the light of your own making. Your Aunt Susan visited not long after that. She stepped into your condo, eyes widening as she looked around. This suits you, close quote, she whispered, her voice thick with pride. You poured her tea, and for the first time in years, you felt what family was meant to feel like. Safe, supportive, rooted in love rather than expectation. Together, you laughed, you shared memories, and you built a new chapter where loyalty wasn't demanded but freely given. Sometimes, when you caught sight of your reflection wearing your white coat, shoulders squared, eyes steady, you thought of your younger self. The one who sat in dark corners, wondering if life would ever be different. You wanted to reach back through time, to hold their trembling hands and whisper, keep walking. It will hurt, but one day you'll stand in a place where you no longer carry their shadows. And that is exactly where you are now. Standing in light, stronger than ever, your life your own. Beyond the hospital, David and Susan became steady presences in your life, reminders that love and family could exist without demands, without conditions. Looking back, you saw the cost of your journey. It wasn't only the money you had given away, it was the years of your youth, the moments of doubt, the nights where you questioned your worth. But standing in the present, the weight of resentment faded. You no longer felt like a wallet, a safety net, or a shadow. You were you, doctor, free soul, and a person who had finally found peace. Looking back on your journey, you realize those painful years were never wasted. They forged you into someone strong enough to set boundaries and brave enough to live for yourself. From a child who was constantly overlooked, you stepped into the light, becoming not only a skilled surgeon, but also a free soul. Your family may still be trapped in the cycles they created, but you are no longer part of it. You have learned that forgiveness does not always mean return, and that true love exists only when it comes without demands. In your new home, as the morning sun streams through the window, peace settles into your heart. This isn't just a personal victory, it's proof that anyone can rise, break the chains, and reclaim their worth. The story you carry is not only about survival but about transformation, about reclaiming the dignity that once seemed lost. And if you've seen even a glimpse of yourself in this journey, leave a gentle like and subscribe, not as an obligation, but as a reminder that you deserve to walk with us through the stories yet to come. You deserve